you been watching some of the Raptors teams?
I watched the Raptors. I went to a game about a month ago.
All right, shout out to the Raptors. Good shot, you know what I'm saying? I love Scottie. I'm glad they didn't make any trades. I love Fred. I love Siakam. I love their core. You like Scottie Barnes?
I like Scottie Barnes.
Shout out to Scottie Barnes. Right. Young fella, nice, man.
I think that was a great pick for them.
It was, man. He the future.
Like I said, they got great wings and this and that, so he's definitely gonna be the future. They're in the play-in right now, so hopefully they can win and get in one of these good teams. They said good in the East, but not their record's good. Don't mean they good.
All right, how you doing? Well, we got a cat in the background. I'm just gonna give that. Look. This is going to be one of the best lives in this channel's history. I have a feeling. I have a lot to say, and I'm going to try to do it as efficiently as humanly possible. And today we're going to be talking about Scottie Barnes. We're going to talk about advanced analytics. We're going to talk about how some of these weird numbers that all these analytics nerds, myself included, how these numbers come to be and how they can be manipulated and what they really mean in the grand context of things. So first, I want to start by acknowledging that Scottie did not have a great year last year, not by anyone's standards. I think there's a lot of value that he provides as a playmaker, and I just don't think the ball was in his hands enough. I think sometimes he was asked to expand his role too much. The shot, the health, the chemistry, the vibes, the fit, the roster, the spacing. There's so many ways that you can help a player and hurt a player. Now, what we've seen this offseason is the firing of your championship head coach, his entire staff. We have seen a complete overhaul in terms of team culture so far, in terms of the talking points. We have seen a clear acknowledgement of what has gone wrong. We've heard stat padding. We've heard we need to move the ball more. We've had a coach come in who preaches nothing but that. And you have a 21-year-old on your roster who is complaining about it all year. Read the tea leaves. This is a player that the Toronto Raptors, their brilliant front office, refused to move for Kevin Durant. We'll preach that over and over because it is relevant. Kevin Durant is a great player, and it's not someone that you just sniff at. Right? I mean, if the other team is asking for your rookie of the year, you move your rookie of the year, unless, of course, you think your rookie of the year might become more than just a rookie of the year. I don't think the Raptors are expecting Scottie Barnes to be an all-star. I don't think they're expecting him to be all-NBA. I honestly think that the Toronto Raptors, right or wrong, expect Scottie Barnes to be an MVP candidate. So I want to look at what that would look like by projecting out the next decade plus of Scottie's career, looking at the advanced stats, and just saying this is what this could become if things break right for the Toronto Raptors. Now, what do I mean by role optimization? Now, typically, and look, we always discuss these things in vacuum. Whenever someone comes at me and says, yo, this guy averaged 11 points per game, this guy had a 4 value of a replacement, this guy had a 6 box plus minus. Stats measure what is happening on the court. They are an estimate. Typically, they are, in an ideal world, they're an accurate estimate of what is happening on the court. Let me give you a hypothetical situation. Let's say tomorrow I trade for Steph Curry. Okay? One of the greatest players in NBA history, one of the greatest players in the NBA today. And let's say I run an offense in which Steph Curry is not allowed to shoot threes. Let's say I run an offense which does not move. And I just say, Steph, I'm going to bench you if you take a three. Obviously, this is never going to happen, right? But, I mean, entertain the absurdity of it for a second. Steph Curry, you're not allowed to take threes. I'm not going to set picks for you. What I want you to do is I want you to break your man off the dribble like your 2001 Allen Iverson. And I want you to get to the hoop. I want you to get to the line. And I want you to take midi pull-ups the whole game. How drastically do you think I'm going to impact Steph Curry's overall statistical profile? Without context, you would imagine that Steph Curry fell off a cliff. Oh, suddenly the Steph can't shoot anymore. Steph has a broken jump shot. Steph Curry's falling off a cliff. He'll never achieve the heights. All the narratives, right? But you have to watch the games. You have to ask yourself sometimes, is a player in a position to succeed? And if they are not in a position to succeed, why? Who are you helping? Look, every player cannot be optimized. That's just a fact. You cannot be optimized. You cannot optimize all 5 players. You can try, you can get pretty close. Ideally, this is a symbiotic relationship between coach and general manager, where you want to put together a group of guys that can actually play together, and you want to put coherent lineups that can build synergy over a period of time. But what happens when you take a jumbo playmaking forward guard and make him a screener in one of the worst spaced offenses in the NBA? And you tack on injuries and you tack on chemistry issues, and maybe he's not getting along with certain people, and maybe he doesn't really agree with what's going on the court, and losses are piling up. I think very easily you can tank a player's value. What if, let me play the inverse game. Let's say tomorrow, I really, really want Precious Achiuwa to become a 3-point shooter, and he's not really one. We've seen flashes of it. But just say, for development's sake, I do the exact opposite of what I did with Steph Curry. That instead of banning 3s, I ban 2s. I tell Precious Achiuwa that I will bench you if you do anything but take a 3. I want you to stand in the corner, and I want you to launch 3s all night. And opposing teams catch on to this. That's just his role. He stands in the corner and he shoots 3s. It's not the right role. It's not a role that he's suited to. But my hope is that by pushing him into a role that he's not comfortable with, he can grow in a somewhat unprecedented way into that role, that I can develop that skill. This happens a lot in the NBA. And this usually creates a great disruption in terms of the statistical profile of a player. Because it is perfectly possible for me to make Joel Embiid look like a bum if I put him in a situation where he does everything he doesn't do well all the time and he does nothing that he does well. Then he's going to suck. Any player can suck. Now, obviously, this doesn't happen, because what coach in their right mind would ask Michael Jordan to play like Reggie Miller and Reggie Miller to play like Michael Jordan? What coach in the world would take the ball out of Luka's hands? Well, maybe a coach that values someone more than Luka. Maybe a coach that is artificially attempting to elevate the statistical profile and therefore contract value of certain players on his team because he has a vested interest in getting them paid. Value over replacement, EPM, BPM, these numbers matter to a lot of front offices. They do. They matter more today than points per game, rebounds per game. They matter perhaps even more than all-star selections. Because as general managers lean more into analytics, smart people learn interesting ways to hijack analytics. There's a lot that analytics do not capture. Take it from someone who studied stats and has been obsessed with numbers my whole life. Just not a humble, maybe it's a bit of a humble brag. I tested gifted in mathematics when I was in grade 2, and I pretty much aced math my whole life. This is just, numbers are my life. I was once accused of viewing people like numbers. This is just how my brain works. My brain works in numbers. And when I see certain numbers almost like being doctored to create the impact and effect of something that isn't actually there, it's kind of funny, actually. Consider the gaping hole in analytics. Possessions are attributed as a positive thing. You running more possessions, being involved with more possessions, playing more minutes, generally speaking, taking more 3s, all of these things positively impact your overall analytical profile. Always. When you start factoring in creation and load into your one metric numbers, you assume that the people who have major playmaking responsibilities within your offense deserve to have playmaking responsibilities within your offense. Now, what if Mike Malone refused to adapt to the talent that he had in Nikola Jokic in 2014 when Nikola Jokic was drafted and they identified what a great passer this guy is? We can actually build this. We can use this. What if Mike Malone was rigid and really old school? And in his belief, post players didn't get to play make. He wanted to play make from the guard position. And he had a Jose Calderon or a Andre Miller type. And his whole focus was Nikola Jokic, you stand in the post, and this point guard is going to give you touches, and you're just going to score down there. That would drastically, if not completely, diminish the value of Nikola Jokic. I'm sure he would have still been a fantastic player, but it completely hijacks his entire greatness. He would never win MVPs. We would never talk about him. We would never see a championship in Denver. None of these things could have happened. The Toronto Raptors see something in Scottie Barnes because this is, in a vacuum, the most valuable player type in the NBA. He is a jumbo playmaker with the ability to switch 1 through 5 defensively. You could not engineer a more perfect basketball specimen, in a sense, in a lab if you tried. Maybe LeBron James. Like, you really start to break down what he could do, and you start to distance it from where the skill level is and where the role is. So the question that I'm going to ask is, what happens when the skill level catches up to the potential and hypothesis? What happens when the role, again, the coaching, the system, everything around him, the system that is operating around him, the players around him, what happens when that suddenly starts to suit his play style? What happens when, well, I think what happens is the Raptors become proven right on their hypothesis that this is a player worth building around. Now I can hear you saying, Rob, this is a guy who struggled in his second year. Can we wait for all-stars before talking about MVPs, all-NBAs, and championships? Well, I get you. But I just want to draw out the full picture. I want to draw out the grand vision of what I think a player like this can be. Okay. So here are, from 1974, these are the top 100 players in the NBA. Interesting note, and I think some of you are going to learn something with this. I've bolded all of the Raptors in red, which include Hakeem Olajuwon at 19, Vince Carter at 28, Tracy McGrady at 32, Shawn Marion at 41, Kawhi Leonard at 46, Chauncey Billups, a brief stint with the Raptors, 49, Kyle Lowry, the GOAT, at 52, Mark Jackson with his cup of tea with the Raptors at 73, Rod Strickland, another cup of tea, 79, and there you go, Marc Gasol at 80, the Raptors championship center. In terms of value of a replacement, I do want to explain this stat because it is so important to realize how much minutes played and games played and overall role and the inefficiency of measuring defense all play a part into building statistical models that make certain players look amazing. Now, look, there are certain players who really are amazing and they have incredibly high warps. So you look at a situation like, I don't know, Michael Jordan, this checks out, but really John Stockton over Kevin Garnett? Like, how do you justify that? If you watch those two careers, I mean, John Stockton over Tim Duncan, John Stockton over Dirk Nowitzki, David Robinson, Kobe Bryant, really? Larry Bird? If you could do it, like if you could really choose, like if you could draft all of these players, where do you think John Stockton actually would go? I bet you anything he doesn't go top 20. I don't even think people would pick him over Kawhi. I'm not being disrespectful, by the way. I think John Stockton's a hell of a player, but I mean, my God, how is he so high? Because this statistic drastically overvalues possessions, assists. If you have the ball a lot and you run the offense to game it in a certain way, which means if you run Jerry Sloan's offense from the 90s, you're going to have certain players like a John Stockton that are going to look amazing. If all you measure is steals, then deflections don't count. If all you measure are blocks, then charges don't count. If all you measure are points, then the person who screens for those points doesn't count. I think you have to watch the game to understand what Scottie could be in the right situation. So, what can Scottie be in the right situation? Obviously, I think he can be an all-star. I think he'll make quite a few all-NBA teams. And I do think that there is a season to 3 seasons that he'll have a window into MVP. Now, I want to preface this by saying this is just my opinion. And this took a little time and a lot of thought and some data modeling and a little bit of, I don't know, stretches of the imagination. But this is what I think Scottie's career will look like when it's all said and done. This is the hypothetical dream scenario for Scottie Barnes, and it is interesting. So we see the first 2 years, and look, it's not bad, it's not great, but 11.6 win shares through 2 seasons, the first 2 seasons, is a really encouraging sign. I think what's not encouraging is that the win shares went down. The box plus minus went down, right? I think for a lot of people, that's a red flag. Like, oh my God, is this guy already regressing? I don't think so. I think the best way to view this is to view it in chunks. I think a player's first 3 years should be viewed as one chunk. I think the next 3 years should be viewed as another chunk. I think then the next 4 years should be viewed as another chunk. And I think the first 3 are just an ascension to a base level where they can be comfortable being who they are on the basketball court, learn the reps, learn the rules, etc. Not everyone's going to come out like Luka. Not everyone's going to come out like, but I swear if I showed you LeBron's numbers here, yeah, there's a great ascension in year 2. But I mean, his rookie season in terms of impact metrics doesn't look much better than Scottie Barnes. In fact, in some respects, it looks worse. So I think credit where credit is due. Scottie deserves a lot of credit. Number one, he played hurt a lot. Those 77 games that he played last year, I would estimate that he was healthy for about 35 of them. Now, he could have sat out. And I think if he had sat out a lot of those games where he was injured, not only would he have perhaps been healthier for the games that he would have played, but I think he easily could have played 42 games last year and justified it with this is sore, that's sprained, that's hurt, that's whatever. Guys sit out all the time. I mean, consider the guy that everyone wanted in place of Scottie, which was Jalen Suggs. And how many games has he missed? And the idea that he's played 94% of his games last year and 90% of his games in year 1 is crazy, given the other side of it. Now, everything we don't measure, all of his hustle, all of his activity, all of his screens, all of his transition play. Look how fast he sprints the court in transition. That helps his teammates. How many times does he screen for a teammate? That helps them. How many times is he willing to make the pass to the pass? That helps his teammates. He does so many things on the basketball court that will never show up in a traditional box plus minus situation, or even assist ratio, assist percentage, or creation load, or whatever. It's never going to count, but it should. I think Scottie is like the perfect example of why stats are flawed in so many ways. And there are players like this, where stats just do not capture what they do. And then there's the complete opposite, where stats drastically overcapture what they do. Players like Robert Williams, and to a lesser extent, also someone like Fred VanVleet. Now, where does this actually land him? So I did the calculation on what a career like this would look like. I'll take you through it sort of year by year. So obviously going into year 3 next year, he will be 22 years old at the start of the season. He's almost 22. He's going to be 22 next month, or in about 40 days. So the value of replacement jumps from 1 to 2.6. Now, as a rule of thumb here, I would say that anything over a 3 to 3.2 box plus minus. First of all, can we explain value replacement? What is value replacement? Let me jump to that, and let me just jump back to this. So what is value replacement? It's a box score estimate of the points per 100 team possessions that a player contributed above the replacement player, which is assigned as -2. So -2 box plus minus is the replacement player, translated to an average team and prorated to 82 game season. If you look at the Raptors, you're going to see players who are on all ends of this, right? And so the actual calculation is, box plus minus. So the player's box plus minus in brackets -2, which is, the replacement player, times the percentage of minutes played. So you would say, like, for instance, in 2016, LeBron played 70% of the minutes for the Cavs. So that would be 70%. Or for Scottie Barnes here, it would be the percentage of minutes played, I believe was 67 in his rookie year, 67. So you would put 67% and then times the team games slash 82. Team games is always 82 unless it's a lockout shortened season. So if it's, I don't know, something else, then you just have to adjust. But that is the value of a replacement. And what value of replacement does is it takes box plus minus and adjusts it for actual value. And to be honest, it adjusts for the fact that, players who play more games, more minutes, impact their team in a more favorable way. You look at this top 100 and there's a lot of long careers here. And sometimes you'll see a guy who's a little bit lower than he actually deserves to be, like a Tracy McGrady versus a Ray Allen. How much of that is, or a Tracy McGrady versus Vince Carter? I mean, if Tracy McGrady plays as many minutes as Vince Carter, he is so far ahead. Like if Tracy McGrady played as many healthy minutes as Vince Carter, and if he'd stayed healthy, I assure you Tracy McGrady is above probably Kevin Garnett. But that's the impact. So you have to factor that in. You have to factor availability. You have to factor minutes. Naturally, if a player can give you elite superstar performance, but they can only give it to you for 25 to 30 minutes a night, or if a player can give you elite star performance, like say a Zion, but they can only stay healthy for about 30% of the games, well, naturally that player is going to have diminished value, and value replacement captures that really well. So in the Scottie Dream scenario, we have a peak that starts around age 24, and I've highlighted the peak in yellow. And that's 25-26. So if he is eligible for his rookie max extension in that year, so that'll be basically when his rookie max extension kicks in. And that is when he starts really kicking into gear. Now, one of the notable things is his shooting percentage improves a lot in this hypothesis. I mean, he shot 52.4% true shooting last year. I don't think that's going to happen ever again in his career. I think what you saw last year was the absolute bottom. Barring injuries, I don't see a year like that ever happening again for him. So next year, I see it going up to 58.2. The only reason for that is I expect the 3-point attempt rate to jump up. Scottie actually has a pretty high 3-point attempt rate. And again, I don't think he gets credit for it. And it's really pissing me off sometimes. Nikola Jokic is a really good 3-point shooter. And I tell you, Scottie Barnes takes almost as many threes as him as an attempt rate. So, in terms of the percentage of shots that he takes, I think his shot distribution is really good. This looks nothing like Ben Simmons, where he refuses to take threes or anything like that. Yeah, he's taking threes, but they're complicated threes. They're not they're not the exact same threes. They're not all off the catch in the corner, or they're not all wide open. Sometimes they're contested. Sometimes they're off motion. Sometimes they're at the end of the shot clock. Sometimes they're self-created. I mean, this is a very, very, very massive leap for a player who came in as a non-shooter to be taking in year 2. And naturally, if you overextend yourself too much, like if I, again, to use the example of overextending a player, let's say, for instance, next year, I want to expand Jakob Poeltl out to be a shooter, but he's not comfortable as a shooter. But I say, listen, Jakob, we got to do this. If you're going to fit into the modern NBA, I need you to be a shooter. So I'm going to need you to take 20-foot jump shots when they're open. And if you don't take them, I'm going to bench you. And he struggles. He struggles really hard. And so his percentage drops. His percentage is naturally going to drop. But how the fuck is he supposed to get better if he never takes the shots? He's got to take those shots. I think with young players, we need to be a little bit more patient. We really do. And I know that everyone wants to jump down Scottie's throat and say he didn't work hard enough, or that he slumped, or the sophomore this, and whatever. But I promise you, I mean, I can't promise you what the hell. I'm not God. I don't know. But I think based on everything I saw last year, and based on what I know about the situation and how things were for him, and just the evolution of players like this, and just where he's come, and just charting his growth out, and watching him through AAU and through Florida State, and just watching how he's ascending, I do think that last year was the bottom. I think next year is going to be a correction. And I think by year 5, you're going to start seeing like more and more, and you're going to wonder how the fuck anyone ever doubted that this guy was going to be great ever. And maybe we'll talk about year 2 as the same way we talk about Jason Tatum's year 2, as, oh, wow, I thought it was going to go one way and then it went another way. What happened in Jason Tatum's year 2? Kyrie Irving on the team, man. Kyrie Irving's on the team. There's all sorts of disruptions. Chemistry is a mess. There was some health stuff that he talked about at one point. It's very similar. It's like eerily similar. And look at where Jason Tatum is now. He's been to the NBA Finals twice. It's like, I mean, or almost to the NBA Finals twice. So, I mean, it's crazy to me, when I listen to some of the takes from last year, even from people that I really respect, people that I really admire, actually. And I was surprised. I had to recalibrate on them a little bit, just how impatient we can be with a guy who struggles for a couple months. It's not like it was all bad, but the way they look at the stats, the way that they edge out any part of the equation that might disagree with what they want to see, and trust me, I've shit tested myself heavily. Am I objectively, or am I just unwilling to look at what's in front of me? Am I unwilling to acknowledge that he has high hips and that he's going to struggle as a pick and roll defender as a guard? No, I'm not. I've openly admitted it several times that I think he's going to struggle guarding quicker point guards and especially getting around screens just because of his high hips. I think the ball handling needs work, the shooting needs work, then the handle needs to get more dynamic and all of that stuff. I think there's a lot to work on here. But I also know that the stuff that he does so well is almost impossible to teach. We've been trying to teach it to Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby for years. They don't get it. It's really hard to teach that forward vision. I mentioned, I believe yesterday in my scouting report, which if you haven't watched it, how to scout a prospect, definitely go check that out after this video. I mentioned that in college, if you have a player who's really big and has really long arms, but they always react a second late to things, they always, assemble the court. I call it assembling the court, which is map the court or see the play. If they always see it a second late in college, they'll be able to get away with it. But then at the NBA, they can't. And it's really difficult to catch them up on that because that's just how their brain processes the game. And sometimes that comes at a very early age. But I think that there's another level and another gear that certain players get to where they see plays before they happen. Tracy McGrady had this. LeBron had this. Luka has this. Jokic has this. Magic had this. Bird had this. There's a lot of players in NBA history who've had this. Kobe had this. Steph, I think he can see things. Sometimes you'll see him react to things before they even happen. Sometimes you'll see Nikola Jokic and he'll throw a pass and it'll be like at the referee. Or maybe not at the referee. Like it'll go like 7 feet off target. And you'll be like, what the hell happened there? And when you freeze frame it, you can see exactly where his teammate was supposed to go and where he was expected to go. It's almost never his fault when he has a turnover. I'm telling you, truthfully. I mean, maybe 1 out of every 7 turnovers he has is actually his fault. It's usually something completely different, like he was fouled on the release, or his teammate did not do what he was supposed to do, or he took a calculated gamble and it didn't pay off. So it's like really special when a player has this. And when you start combining athletic profile of Scottie and the work ethic, it really is it's not hard to understand why the Raptors have such a strong sense of belief in him. So to go back to this, around age 24, I see him starting to ascend into what I consider perennial all-star status. I wonder if he makes an all-star team as early as 24, 25, so that would be the year after next year. The win shares steadily start to climb. I do have him, keeping this peak from 24 to 30. I think that's around where I think his peak will be. To those of you who are looking at Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam and saying, hey, do we want to extend these guys who are 29? Well, this is kind of the trajectory of a lot of NBA players. They start declining at 30. And Scottie, I think, will be no different. I think, the heavy minutes load, all the youth basketball, all of that stuff will start to catch up to him around 30. And while I don't expect like a drastic Lonzo Ball or LaMelo Ball type of, cataclysmic, fall off in numbers, I certainly do not expect this to be a DeMar DeRozan or a Pascal Siakam situation where he just keeps getting better and better and better. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just think that he's the type of player, just from a profile perspective that peaks at 28. So he's 21 now. So that's 7 years away, right? His peak year is honestly an all-time great year, right? 9.5 box plus minus, 8.1, value of replacement. That's Jordan-esque, LeBron-esque territory for that 1 year. And maybe the next year a little bit as well, maybe not as healthy, but that's also an all-time great year. There's 3 like really, really, really great peak years there. And I think that the Raptors need to drastically alter their plans to have a core that peaks with him right there, because there's no assurances, in all honesty, that he's on this team when he's 27. None at all, right? Or 26. Like, he could leave, he could demand a trade. There's so many things that can go wrong. So you want to start building this core. Now, the final thing, a lot of people were surprised by the Grady Dick pick. I was too. And it really started to dawn on me how much this guy fits what Scottie's doing. And they talked about it. They openly said, this is a player that's going to work really well with Scottie. When Bobby Webster was questioned about Darko Rajakovic, said he's going to work really well with Scottie. Do you see what's happening here? Or are you not getting the hint? Last year, I showed a video of Bobby Webster talking to Tim McAuliffe, and he was asked, do you see an MVP on this roster? And he said, I see some MVP potential. And a lot of people incorrectly, in my opinion, assumed that he was talking about Pascal Siakam. And I don't think he was. I don't think he's delusional enough. I don't think they would have put Pascal Siakam in the trade block, or even been exploring the concept of a trade with him, or trying to get, Giannis Antetokounmpo on the team when you already. I don't think you do these things if you believe this guy's an MVP caliber talent. You just don't. So the question then became, for me, if you think he's an MVP talent, what are you doing to his development? That's my entire frustration last year. If you believe this, why are you doing this? And I think what it is, in my estimation, is there was a war, a mini war, a war of ideas in the Raptors organization, which created a lot of disharmony. And I don't know who was on which side, but I can kind of give you both sides of the coin. Side number 1, bring Scottie along slowly, build this thing around Fred, Pascal, OG until Scottie is ready to step into whatever he's supposed to be and lead the group, right? Kind of like DeMar, Kyle, right? Kyle was the better player, a slightly older player, and then, DeMar sort of overtook him a little bit and he sort of ascended it. Or again, the passing of the torch from Kyle Lowry to Pascal Siakam. It's always worked this way. But the Raptors have never really had a lottery talent like this. They've never had a top 5 recruit like this. They've never had a guy with MVP potential since Vince Carter, unless you count like 1 year of Kawhi Leonard. So the rules change. The rules are different. And I imagine that Bobby Webster registered this right away. And you really do need to nurture a talent like this. You need to develop differently, and you need to change. And so you're seeing change across the board. Everything he asked for, he's getting. Please don't take this the wrong way. He's not being a spoiled brat. Everything he's asking for is coherent basketball-wise, and it is the right thing to do. But he's asked for the ball in his hands, and I think he's going to get it. He's asked for an offense that moves more, and he's going to get it. He's asked for shooting around him, and he's going to get it. I believe that he prefers to play in the mid post, pinch post, high post, whatever, that area of the court. And that area of the court has been occupied by a lot of different players. And I think they're going to start thinking long and hard about how to fit players with the understanding that that's the part of the court that he's going to operate in. Because that's the place you want to put your best playmaker. Your jumbo creator should not be standing in the corner waiting for a pass that's never going to come. The issue with Scottie and Pascal is not that they cannot play together. A player like Pascal Siakam can thrive next to a player like Scottie Barnes. The problem is they cannot both occupy the exact same role within your team. And one of these players has a great deal more intangible qualities to help the other. To the effect of what I think will eventually happen, I'm not really sure whether the Raptors will bring back Pascal Siakam or Fred VanVleet. But what I do know is that every single indication and every single move has been made in accordance with what's best for Scottie, as it should be. Selection of Grady Dick is such a departure, such a wide departure from the types of players that this team has chosen to select over the last 6 years. Go look at it. Masai Ujiri has never selected a white player, first of all. Masai Ujiri has never selected a non-defender with a so-so wingspan. It's never happened before. I can go back a long time. This is not his type of pick. It's not his type of player. It's not the type of player that gets him excited. It is the type of player, however, that fits really well on a team with Scottie Barnes. And when you start building around players, that player becomes your first principle in a nutshell. And so you start orienting decisions around that player: coach, play style, roster, depth, philosophy. Everything has to be aligned with that player's timeline and preferences. Because don't take it for granted that a player who will have every option on the planet is going to re-sign with you if you completely botch his development. And I have a feeling Scottie's going to be great no matter what. He works way too hard. He has like a clear vision of the type of player he wants to be. He's a guy who grew up idolizing Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant and Magic Johnson. Like, this is a player who has big dreams for the type of player he wants to be. And I assure you, I'm confident that last year did not feel fun for him, to probably fall very, very short of his expectations. But I do think that if you see the reaction from the Raptors, this is not simply, oh, we missed the playoffs. Sure, you missed the playoffs in Tampa. No one got fired. I think this lit a fire under their asses because they realized what was at stake. What's at stake here is you blow another year of development waiting for Nick Nurse to do the right thing, waiting for Fred and Pascal to pass the torch. And now you lose the prospect. You lose all that MVP potential. You derail his career. It happens more often than you'd think. There are a lot of players out there in NBA history that we just don't talk about. They ended up in the wrong situation. They had a 10% chance maybe to be on that list that I showed you earlier. It just didn't click. You don't waste these years. The ages from 12 till about 25 are really crucial, not only for brain development, cognitive development, but also skill development. This is very important. I think Scottie gets it. I think Scottie gets the task at hand, and I think he's going to be really, really good. So what does this actually look like in a historical context? Well, I'll tell you. If he achieves that hypothesis, and of course, there will be players who are currently active right now who are going to continue climbing up this list, specifically Nikola Jokic and Joel Embiid and Giannis Antetokounmpo and Luka Doncic. I'm sure that all of those guys will climb into the top 30, top 40 at some point. But if right now I was to drop the finished version of Scottie Barnes, the version that I think he'll be, based on hopes and dreams and generous analysis, he would fit in right behind Dirk Nowitzki, ahead of David Robinson, Charles Barkley, Kevin Durant so far. Again, KD is going to continue climbing here. So if KD has 3 more prime years, KD is ahead of probably Tim Duncan. So he'll be ahead of the late Kobe Bryant, Julius Erving, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, James Harden. Again, James Harden's still active. James climbing. James could climb all the way past Kobe. If he has like 3 more good years, I mean, James Harden could be in the top 10. There's a lot of really great active players right now. But he would have a career that is significantly better than Paul Pierce, Scottie Pippen, Dwayne Wade, Gary Payton, Vince Carter, Ray Allen, Pau Gasol. That is the level of impact and upside that I see in a Scottie Barnes. And that is exactly the level of upside that you completely change your plans, change your coach, fire your championship coach, change your draft strategy, change your roster building strategy, change all your timeline, change your culture, change everything. Because if this guy was developing, I guarantee you Nick Nurse doesn't get fired. And I think and if Scottie and Fred were vibing super hard, and Fred was a vital part of Scottie's ascension, and Fred was really instrumental in helping Scottie become a pro, and he was really nurturing I guarantee you there'd be no doubt that Fred VanVleet would be back. No doubt. For a year, I saw this team do the exact opposite of everything they were supposed to do. There are all these guys that Scottie was close to, and they just kept going out the door. Svi Mihalik, Armani Brooks, Sam Decker, Yuta Watanabe, Goran Dragic, Ish Wainwright, just all of the people that you could see he was like really close with. They just all kept boom, 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 except for OG, Precious, Christian Coloco. I think now you'll see that the direction will shift. And I wonder why those guys just kept going out the door. It was like clockwork. It's just like anytime he get close to a player, it's just boom, waved, boom, out. Just cutting him off, isolating him. It's time for a change. And look, this is a symbiotic relationship. This is a two-way street. So they're going to give him what he wants, which is the role he wants, the roster he wants, the type of play style he wants. And now it's up to him. Now you lead it. 25, 30 wins, not acceptable. Another, 2 box plus minus season, probably not acceptable. Another 15, 16 point per game season, not acceptable. He's going to have to take a major step up too. This seems like a handshake deal where Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster looked him in the eyes and said, are you actually ready for what we want to give you? And I think he said yes. So that's where I'm at. I hope this turns out to be true. I hope we look at this video 17 years from now. Look, I look at videos that I made 17 years ago on YouTube now, and I either laugh, cry, or celebrate how right I was. I hope I can pull this video up 17 years from now and show my kids as Scottie Barnes is being, in his last season and he's retiring and we're talking about Hall of Fame. I hope that I can pull this video up of this younger version of myself and show my kid, look, I knew he'd be this great. That's my hope. Anyways, when I answer your questions, we're at 42 minutes here, at 190 comments. I'm assuming a lot of them are telling me I'm crazy. That's cool. I don't mind. Also assuming a lot of them are talking about Fred VanVleet getting traded, because that tends to be the conversation here a lot. But may I just say how much I appreciate y'all for 2:32 in the morning, and you got 123 people on this live. Thank you so much. Okay. Wow, there's a lot of comments. Man, I need to learn, I need to get a co-host or something, like someone who could just pull these up, as they're coming. Robert West. Banchero has more of a chance to be an MVP than Scottie. I disagree. To be an MVP, you got to be a bucket getter for 4-quarter buddy, not just one. Disagree. Nikola Jokic is not a huge first quarter player. What's Scottie's go-to move? May I just say that I think that this is a fundamental misunderstanding of basketball. Look, I think NBA 2K has bled your brains dry of actual basketball analysis and an understanding of how the game is played. The game is not played by, who scores 60 points. You can score 60 points and lose a game. At the end of the day, a lot of advanced analytics do measure wins and impacts on winning. This is really what teams are after. And yeah, points are a part of winning. You know what else is a part of winning? Passing, rebounding, defense, versatility, screen setting. All of this is a part of winning. You know what else is part of winning? Intangibles, like leadership. I think Scottie does a lot of things to help you win. I'm not saying, I'm not trying to be controversial by saying I think he's way better than Paolo Banchero, but if you want me to measure Paolo's year one versus Scottie's year one, I think you'd be surprised at just what the analytics say. The analytics say Scottie's better. I'm assuming you mean Robert West. That's funny. it seems like Robert West was just fighting with everybody in terms of, and I mean, look, I'm not trying to alienate you. You obviously have an opinion, and that's fine. It's clear. I mean, like, there's no way that you can look at these stats from the year 1 and year 2 and say that's definitely going to be an MVP. You just can't, right? If you wanted to be like, okay, that's definitely an MVP, he probably should have averaged like 20 points per game last year with like 8 rebounds, 4 assists. Maybe then you'd feel comfortable. Then you'd be like, oh, yeah, I could see the MVP. But I'm just saying growth is not linear. And I look at year 1 and year 2 as a big block. And if you look at former MVPs and say, how many of them in years 1 and 2 combined for 11.2 win shares, I think you'll find that that number is pretty in line with former MVPs. Here's the first Fred comment. Honestly, I'm disappointed the Raptors are interested in re-signing Fred VanVleet. I mean, how do you know they are interested in signing him? All I hear is this team wants Fred. This team's after Fred. Orlando, look, all we heard was Orlando is definitely going to make a big offer for Fred, right? Y'all remember that? Like 4 months ago, it was like a big fake out. They're definitely going to make him. They're going to take him away from the Raptors, right? And then we heard Chicago, LA, who refused to deal anything of substance for him. We heard the LA Clippers. We've heard the Houston Rockets definitely want Fred. Well, guess what? The Houston Rockets and the Orlando Magic just did. They both drafted 6'7" point guards. You really think they're running after Fred? Maybe they will. I'm just saying that Fred VanVleet reminds me of a lot of little, kids in high school that swear that they have girls after them. You know what I mean? Like those people are just like, yo, all these girls online want me. All this, you know what I mean? I wouldn't believe the rumors. Look, I'll tell you right now, Jake Fisher or Heavy.com or any one of these people, they get a call from Fred's agent saying, this team has expressed interest. They have no reason not to report that. That's actually a credible source telling you this. So this is a rumor. I don't think the Raptors are leaking that this team and that team and that team want Fred. I don't think those teams are leaking that they want Fred. Maybe you need to ask yourself the question, who benefits from a bidding war for Fred VanVleet? You think these teams don't talk to each other? You think the Raptors can't call Jeff Weltman and be like, are you seriously interested in, Fred VanVleet? It's such a weird thing, right? And of course, it's anonymous source. So you can't even trace it back to Fred. You can't even confront Fred about it. You can't be like, hey, Fred, why are you going around telling every single person that every team wants you? You can't even do that because he's not saying it, right? It's not like he went on an interview and said, Chicago Bulls want me. And then, Mark Eversley's like, actually, we don't. We're cool. We're chill. We don't need you. I promise you, if teams are not lining up for Fred, for Pascal and OG, they're not lining up for Fred VanVleet. I just don't think NBA teams are that stupid, and the ones that are already have big project point guards. Cat can't sleep because of the thunderstorm. Yeah, the thunderstorm was insane, man. Yeah, I think you need to consider other elements of basketball, man. I mean, he was in a featured role on a bad team, right? Scottie had better numbers overall on a 47-win team the year before as a rookie. How do you know that Paolo is not going to have a sophomore slump? You guaranteeing that? He's a physically imposing presence. He's a grown man, as you say, and he's featured on offense, and he's a gifted playmaker. I just think there are more barriers to him being a superstar than there are for Scottie. I mean, if you think jump shot is a question mark for both of them, what exactly is your appeal for Paolo other than he likes to take more shots? And he was on a worse team with no expectations, and he's not sharing the court with a Pascal Siakam or a Fred VanVleet. And if your assumption is, well, Rob, Scottie's only good because he plays with better players. Well, consider the game where Pascal Siakam missed and they ran the offense through Scottie. Remember against Atlanta, the game where he unfortunately missed that final layup? He had a triple-double in that game. I think he had nearly a triple-double. It was like 29, 9, and 9 or something like that. The percentages were not good, but he's clearly capable of putting up 29, 9, and 9 whenever the hell he wants. It won't be efficient. It won't be pretty, but we're building up to that, and it won't lead to winning. And look, Scotty's a winning player. He's going to play a role that's going to impact winning, and he's not going to go outside of his role too much. And that's actually the challenge, because in an ideal world, you want young players to go outside of themselves when they're that young. You want them to try things, dribble the ball, turn it over, do whatever. These early reps matter. And Scottie is not trying to do that because he's unselfish. Like, he's really unselfish. He's going to look at the other guys and say, why should OG and Pascal suffer? Because I need reps. You know what I mean? And I think that mentality is great. And the other thing that I think is really, really underrated about Scottie's year last year is he worked so hard during the season. Like, this is an approach that Brian talked about in our interview, where they're up at midnight and they're doing shoot around while other people are at home, like getting rest, right? And I'm just trying to tell you, it's not normal for players to practice during the season, like a lot. Like, this is exceedingly rare, especially when your role is so difficult on defense. You're banging with Nikola Jokic one night, you're chasing around Chris Paul one night. This is an exhaustion, but it's part of a much bigger plan. And I know that the plan is really difficult to see for certain people because, I don't know, you lack knowledge, imagination, or conviction. I don't know what you lack, but I'm pretty much staking my reputation on it at this point. I mean, if Scotty's a lemon, right? I mean, I still support him no matter what. But I stand to look pretty foolish. Would you not agree? As the internet's big Scottie Barnes is going to be great champion, I stand to look really dumb if he ends up being a role player, right? So I wouldn't do this for a player that I did not think was going to be a superstar. I just wouldn't. Like, there's nothing to gain from it. I completely tarnished my reputation. I promise you, every time he had a bad game, I got like 50 DMs. 50. Every time. When he had 0 points or whatever, like, my phone's blowing up with comments. See, told you so, told you so. People want this guy to fail because they hate me or something. Or they hate him and they want to see me fail. I have no idea. But trust me, I have a lot, I think, personally invested in this. And I just want him to do well, obviously, not for me or anything, but for himself. Anyways, I'm going to get out of here. It does not look like these comments are anything but the entire chat responding to Robert West, saying whatever the hell he's saying. I mean, no disrespect, Rob, but I don't agree with you. And obviously, we can agree to disagree and we can see who's right. But I'm not seeing a hell of a lot of coherent ideas being put forth other than, Paolo's game looks prettier to you, and which I don't even disagree with. Skills are effectively what makes a game look pretty. If a guy has a nice handle, his game's going to look prettier. Paolo's game is way more polished than Scottie's. But maybe ask yourself, what if one day Scottie catches up on the skill department? Because skills can be added, man. If I attend, I don't know, shooting camp, right? I can fix my form. I mean, I'm never going to be Steph Curry, but I can fix my form. If I attend handle life, I can improve my handle by 20 to 30% for sure. Absolutely. Right? So at the end of the day, you just have to ask yourself, what happens when Scottie's skills catch up to his game? Because I think the odds of his skills catching up to his game are so much better than Paolo's athleticism catching up to Scottie's. And that's the difference. Because when I look at someone like Cade Cunningham, and he's not overly athletic, and he's not bursty, and he's not overly strong, I see a stop. I see a stoppage to his greatness, right? Like, it's like Paul Pierce, right? Like, he was slow. So he could be great, but his max is not going to be what Kobe and Jordan were. There's always going to be a gap between those guys and him, right? Even Desmond Bane, we talk about Desmond Bane a lot, right? Can Desmond Bane, if he tries really, really, really hard, be the greatest player of all time? No. Can he be one of the 5 greatest shooting guards of all time? No. There's nothing he's going to be able to do that is going to, I don't want to say no, because who knows? Maybe, I think the great equalizer there would be if he could become like a 46% three-point shooter, 44% three-point shooter on crazy volume and have a team entirely built around him like Steph Curry. Maybe then you can spam it, right? but I doubt it. There's just certain upper limits to how great a player can be, either, because they intellectually just, or from the processing side, they just don't process the game fast enough. And so there's a stunted limitation to how great they can really be. Like Chris Bosh is a great example of that. Chris Bosh is a great example of that. Just someone who didn't see the game as well as, say, Detlef Schrempf, Tony Kukoc, Arvydas Sabonis, LeBron James, like guys who just Draymond Green, right? Like if Draymond Green tried his absolute best, could he become better than Shaquille O'Neal? No. But if Draymond Green was 7 feet tall, Draymond Green would be MVP, probably. So it's just, there's certain limits, and I don't think Scottie has a lot of limits. I think his limit is mainly his own mindset towards scoring, which is changing and can change, and his own skill package and his own skill development, which is also changing. I think they are consistently addressing the parts of his game that need to be addressed. So that's where I'm at with this. God. I think management should be worried about tanking the year after they removed their draft pick for that season. I don't. And I don't think they're tanking. Just an FYI, you only tank for a draft pick. But if you rebuild and you end up with 35 wins, is that really the end of the world? Like if you let Fred go and you end up with 35 wins, is that like you're crying over that? I don't think so. Okay, yeah, you give the 10th pick to the Spurs in a weak draft. Does it matter at this point? You're giving up the pick anyway, right? I would rather convey the pick than keep it. You want to know my opinion? That's my opinion. It's top 6 protected. I don't want a top 5 pick in next year's draft. I mean, obviously, I would hate if we convey the 6th pick or the 7th pick, because then I would prefer the 5th pick. But the worst thing that could happen for the Raptors, I'll give you the worst case scenario. Worst case scenario, you keep the pick next year. Pascal Siakam walks. So somehow you tank this year, you sit Siakam, whatever, you bottom out. I don't know why you would do that, but let's say you do. You bottom out, you get a bottom 5 pick, you keep it, you draft someone half decent. I'm not saying the draft is totally trash. Maybe some good players emerge, but they're not Wemby. They're not, I don't even think they're MN Thompson level. Keep that pick. Siakam leaves. And then the next year, you really bottom out. You have an injury, maybe OG leaves, maybe something happens, and you really bottom out. And now you actually do have to convey the pick again. And it's the same protection because it carried forward because you kept your 2024 pick. And now you convey a really high pick in a really good draft. Like you convey the 7th or 8th pick in like one of the best drafts. That would be the worst scenario. That's why the protection is so low. Because if they had lottery protected it, there would be a very high chance that they would have to forward up they would have to extend when they were conveying it. That's my read on it. It's not necessarily a popular take, but I think it is the right take. All right, guys, take care. Bro, when did you get a cat? I don't have a cat. My girlfriend has a cat, and I am allergic to this cat a little bit. Like I'm a little bit allergic to him. Like I can't. Like I have to wash my hands after I touch him. Like I'm not allergic to him. Like I'm gonna sneeze if he's around me, but his dander is like, man. Hey, man. Hey, you want to say hi? You want to say hi to the live? Come here. No, he doesn't want to. He's shy. All right. He's not that shy. He's cute. He's a cute cat. Anyway, I'll talk to y'all later. Have a great night. I hope this live was good. I hope it was entertaining. I hate cats. Why? Weird. All right. Sub up if you haven't already. We're on our way to 6,000. Surprisingly fast. It's great. It's good stuff. It's happening. All right. Talk to y'all later. Peace.